shine, new hype, new vibe, new wave. Play off if you world, talk on new
Hey y'all, it's Renegade, and it's time to spill more Reali-Tea in another Reali-Tea retrospective. As always, this series will take a deep dive at some of the most popular shows that have finished here in 2024. We'll start with my spoiler-free review to give anyone who hasn't seen the show a taste of just what you're in for. Then we'll get into an episode-by-episode review of the most needed to be talked about moments. So let's get some discussion going in the comments below, y'all. In today's recap, we return to our neighbors in the Great White North as their latest edition of everyone's favorite voyeur reality competition takes its players to Dark Hollywood, as fame becomes the name of the game. Let me welcome you all to Big Brother Canada 12. So, I'll be very honest here, there was a point in time where I had almost sworn off of Big Brother entirely. The casting had got very boring or very dark. The gameplay was just not that exciting, the show just felt like it hadn't invested much self in it. But when I discovered Big Brother Canada during the airing of Big Brother Canada 3, I fell back in love with the show again because it felt like the showrunners in Canada really cared as much as the show as the fans did and wanted to deliver the best product possible. Here we stand almost 10 seasons later, and recently there have been questions as to whether or not the show could still hold that title, as the show follows the same format as the US Big Brother, and with Big Brother 23 being a turning point in the casting of the show, it seems like Big Brother Canada did the exact opposite. Despite having series highs with Big Brother Canada 9 and 10, the post-COVID decision to cancel the live feeds starting with Big Brother Canada 11 really put a damper on the entire show, but all of these bad decisions did not get Big Brother Canada cancelled, which is surprising, and we now have a 12th edition with sponsors out the booty hole, attempting to rebound and put the series back on the map with a Hollywood twist. Does the season prove award-winning? Well, let's discuss more in my spoiler-free review. Now, one thing about Big Brother North America is that while it is a very flawed game, it is an entertaining game. In the wrong hands, it's easy to end up with a season like Big Brother US 25 or Big Brother Canada 11 that are just dominated by the same people winning the same type of competitions over and over, which generally leads to pretty terrible TV. But in this season, it feels like the showrunners really found some very equitable competitions to the point where it feels like the wins were very spread around and almost everyone could have the ability to win if they really wanted to. I also think the decision to not allow the head of household to play in the power veto competition is a very smart decision, as it is one less person to ensure the veto does not get used, meaning anyone and everyone could become a replacement nominee at any time. I also love the themes of Big Brother Canada in comparison to Big Brother US, because they always follow through on having something special season long that takes akin to old school Survivor seasons where they used to go to new locations every year. Each season feels very separate for that reason, and the season's movie themed twists like the movie night Massacre and the executive veto add a nice shake up to the game without being game breaking. So overall, I'm going to give the format of Big Brother Canada 12 an A- for only one criticism, which I'm going to get into when it comes to the cast, because truth be told, I hate semi-returnee seasons, and obviously the season features the returnee of two recent Big Brother Canada All-Stars with 12 brand new house guests. Feels like such a different season when you just play an all newbie season or an all returnee season because everyone is on a same playing field. In these half-assed seasons, we end up with one or two players sort of becoming the source of drama or strategy, and it kind of sucks for both the new players who now truly don't get a pure game, or for the returnees who have a different set of standards to live up to. Because of that, I can't say I'm fully on board with the decision to bring back only two people, but I will say at least one of them completely delivers for me. The other one, while I do like them, watch the show for yourself, and you could decide on that one. But ultimately, the newbie cast for me really delivers, especially the ladies of the season really stand out for me from the jump. The men are there too, and while I think they take a little bit more time to develop, everyone ultimately brings something to the table this season as one of the wildest and most fluid casts we've had in recent memory. So, despite my hate for the semi-returnee cast, I'm going to give them another A-. Now, in the complete reversal from everything that I've said in my other review videos, I actually kind of love the editing of this season. I can't remember a season where I really got to know some of these early outs really well, and the season I think does a great job of eventually getting around to developing every person to some degree. It did not take me very long to feel like I had each personality identified, and while we don't have the feeds to really compare it to, it felt like we got the real story of what happened this season for the most part. I mean, we still have the digital dailies and things like that to go off of, which I'll be honest, I never watched. But I don't think there was any real portion of the game that left me confused. Everything felt well explained and well paced, and I just very much so enjoyed the edited episodes, which doesn't usually happen very often in Big Brother. So I'm actually going to give them an A for the solid edit. Overall, Big Brother Canada 12 is an extremely solid season of Big Brother, despite two glaring negatives in the lack of live feeds, as well as the imbalanced, mostly newbie, but let's throw into All Stars casting decision. I think it's everything you could really ask for in this season of a show, at least in one in which two players have an obvious advantage over the rest of the cast. This is some great drama, there's some great some strategic moves that are so bad that they're great, and overall, just a very consistent season of the show in my eyes. I do think that because of the general casting decision here, the season feels like it's going to be underrated overall in the general community, but I personally am going to praise this season for being one of the better seasons that I've watched in the last few years. I'm going to give Big Brother Canada 12 overall an A minus, as it is a semi-flawed season with an unexpectedly amazing outcome. So, now that you know what the show is and what my thoughts are on it, let's get into the real tea, y'all. If you haven't seen the show, I definitely suggest stopping here or use the chapter guide to go to specific episodes. So night one begins as we meet our 12 new house guests as they enter the famed Big Brother Canada studios, ready to see their name in lights as the newest Big Brother Canada winner, but soon learn that their path to stardom could be blocked by two returning A-list all-stars as Season 9's Spicy V and Season 7's Poutine Poppy Anthony join the cast as mystery house guests, and after a short get-to-know-you session, the game's first twist begins with the Choose Your Entourage competition. We learn here that Anthony and Victoria have been given safety for the first week of the game and will begin the captain of their own entourage, with the new house guests competing to get their choice of which entourage they will join, while Anthony and Victoria will face off later in a competition to not only become the first head of household, but also win safety for their entire entourage. In the first portion of the challenge, house guests compete in an endurance competition to hang onto a rope while standing on a slanted platform, moving down the rope at regular time intervals, eliminating themselves from the challenge if they are unable to stay on the platform any longer. The order they fall out is the order that they will select entourages, with the first house guest to fall getting their last pick, while the last house guest standing not only gets their first choice of entourage, but also guaranteed safety for the week. Realizing this is the perfect competition to win that will get you safety without all the blood on your hands, Lexus tells us that she really wants to win this one, and she does, outlasting all the rest to secure her safety for the week in the first of many comp wins, as she says, and quickly joins Anthony's entourage. But surprisingly, the next three to drop, Tola, Matthew, and Janine, all joined Spicy V's entourage, which was surprising to me because I figured the first seven would just all choose the same entourage, but I guess there really is no advantage either way here. Eventually, our divides are Spicy V's entourage of Tola, Matthew, Janine, Avery, Todd, and Kayla, while Lexus, Donna, Vivek, Bailey, Dennis, and Elijah, who's the first to drop and doesn't get a choice, are Anthony's entourage. While initially, as it is in these part newbie, part returnee seasons, the newbies make an alliance prior to the returnees entering to get rid of them. It really seems like they quickly forget about this as Anthony and Victoria start to get the game really going as the two returnees have officially made a pact to divide and conquer this house, with the goal having a legendary final two. Now, Avery gives massive superfan energy and is sharing her status all over the house, and she becomes the first newbie to turn as her and Spicy B become the Havoc Hotties, while Anthony gets into Vivek's ear. But what turns out to be the biggest story point of the first week is the formation of the Big Sisters Alliance, as all of the women decide to work together to ensure the first female winner since season 6. But they aren't too secret as Anthony clocks their gathering and makes sure all the men are aware of it as well. Victoria tries to convince Anthony that a man needs to go this week, but it's a big red flag for the Poutine Poppy as he prefers to hold all the control. In the game's first head of household competition, the new house guests were asked a series of first impression questions as Anthony and Victoria were then tasked to guess what the majority of their entourage answered. With each incorrect answer, the captain must eliminate one of their entourage members, and if they both answer correctly, the house guest who locks in last has to eliminate a member. The captain with the last entourage member standing will become the first head of household, earning safety for their team. Deciding he wants to dictate the direction of the game, Anthony chooses not to throw the competition to Spicy V and instead wins his first head of household competition in his Big Brother Canada history. This also means that all of Victoria's entourage is up for eviction, as one of Avery, Janine, Kayla, Matthew, Todd, or Tola will be leaving. There's a really touching moment after the head of household room reveal, and Anthony gets his photos where he dedicates his game to his best friend Buck, who passed away shortly before the game started. Anthony starts checking in with Victoria and realizes that she needs to first tell him about the girls. Victoria decides to shift the narrative and tell Anthony that Janine is the one that's been trying to get the women together. Janine's case is not made much better when she has a one-on-one with Anthony where she gives him nothing, making it clear that Janine just doesn't have much interest working with him. Avery makes a pretty heartwarming plea to work with Anthony as they bond over losing people close to them, and it seems like they have a very touching relationship right from the start. Now, the new house guests have to split into 3 teams of 4 for their first have not competition of the season called Bon Appetit. House guests must crawl down their lane to the table of pies, searching through the pies using only their face to find a card, with either a have or try again symbol inside. Once they find a card, regardless of what it says, the house guest must chug a glass of milk, crawl back down their lane, and the next house guest can go. First 2 teams to find 4 have cards will be the haves for the week, while the remaining team become the have-nots. This turns out to be a pretty disgusting challenge to watch, honestly, because there's some really gross pies in there, and just looking at this screen cap just almost makes you want to vomit. So let's just go ahead and move on here, because ultimately the team of Avery, Donna, Lexus, and Vivek lose the challenge and become the first have-nots of the season. Before nominations, Anthony takes Vivek to Wendy's, which gives Vivek more confidence in the relationship, while Season 7 winner Dan is waiting to give Anthony a surprise visit in a nice hype moment. Revealing his plans to his closest allies, Anthony sets the tone of the season with his first nominations, choosing to put up his target Janine, naming her as the most vocal in creating a women's alliance, while also naming Anthony as her target. Anthony decides to name Avery as his pawn, to which she has a tearful performance, although Anthony already told her prior to the ceremony that she's going up, meaning 2 of the big sisters are already in the firing line. Following the first round of nominations, the Big Sisters are shaken given that 2 of them are on the block, but at the same time, there still seems to be some trust between the women as Bailey conspires that maybe it was Tola who said something about the women being too close together, and Anthony is just blaming Janine as a scapegoat, and so begins Bailey's push to try to get Tola on the block. Meanwhile, a small alliance within the Big Sisters starts to develop as Avery, Kayla, Lexus, and Victoria discuss how a woman of color needs to win the game, realizing that they may need to throw POV and sacrifice Janine in order to keep Anthony close. This is what prompts them to actually include Anthony in on their group as the Hot Chocolate Alliance is born. The POV draw occurs, and just a reminder, in Big Brother Canada, the HOH does not compete in the Power of Veto competition, which is a very interesting twist still on the game that I kind of really enjoy. Avery randomly selects Tola, which pisses off Bailey, who is then chosen to host, while Janine chooses Dennis and Anthony selects Matthew. We get to our first Power of Veto competition of the season called Down the Rabbit Hole, and in this competition, house guests must crawl in their pitch black burrow to find a puzzle grid. Using their sense of touch, they must identify the shapes on their grid, search the burrow for matching pieces, and recreate the grid on their station. The first house guest to correctly recreate their grid will win the Power of Veto. It comes down to a pretty close race here between Dennis and Janine, and in the end, at one point, it seemed like Janine is actually 2 pieces away from winning, but then she starts to second guess a lot of her choices, which opens the door for superfan Dennis to secure his safety for the week as he wins the first Power of Veto. So, what does Dennis do with all this power? Well, there actually is a lot of question because everyone thinks Dennis has a mind of his own and won't really be manipulated to make a move that is not his own. Janine tries to pin all the house's drama on Tola as she feels he is the real reason behind all of the drama, but at the Power of Veto ceremony, Dennis decides not to shake anything up and does not use the Power of Veto, leaving Avery and Janine up for the game's first eviction. Although, heading into the first vote, Avery thinks it's rather locked in that Janine is going home, there's still a lot of tension within the Big Sisters that starts to manifest into some drama that will seep its way into next week, as Lexus starts to find herself in a flirtmance with Matthew, and the other girls clock Lexus spending a lot of the time with the guys, wondering exactly where her loyalties lie, or if she's going to pick the dick over the chicks. A lot of this drama is purposely started by Victoria because she wants to set another target within the women, which I kind of love because Spicy V has become, she just has so much messiness here, but it actually seems kind of organized this season, dare I say. Bailey and Donna take the bait, and Victoria spills the news to Lexus, but twists the narrative that Donna is the one who started it all, which just makes Lexus even spicier. Meanwhile, Vivek finds himself in hot water because it turns out everyone is over the way he's been spreading information between parties, but doesn't seem loyal to anybody. Janine recalls a conversation with Vivek where she asked him if he was still in on the OG-12, but she feels like Vivek likely took this information to Anthony and started all of the drama, which gets so much more attention on Vivek. And when Janine confronts him, he's just very confused, unsure where all of this attention is coming from. It's now time for our first eviction of the season, and what is typical on Big Brother? Everyone just wants to vote with the House majority, especially in the beginning, and the season is no different, as we learned that in a unanimous 11-0 vote, our first house guest to leave this season is Janine. Now, one of the reasons I have contemplated, but ultimately have not applied to Big Brother yet, is especially after turning 30, it was just realizing that if I'm playing this game, I'm likely going to be one of the oldest house guests, which is crazy to think that 30-year-old would be the oldest house guest in a house here. But, generally that person is always evicted within the first few weeks. So I definitely feel for superfan Janine here, whose time definitely got cut short here. I'm not really sure if I had much faith in her as a player anyway, but it's also hard to tell since the edit really only shows us so much. But at least she got to live out her dream, and I think I almost died of laughter when she exited the house the wrong way, and then has that little moment with her running the right way before the doors close. Now, the episode ends as we begin our next head of household competition, as Arissa then informs the house guests that the entourages were over and it is an individual game moving forward. This week begins with our next head of household competition, spitting venom, as the house guests must suck up venom from their basin with their mouths, climb the stairs, and spit their venom into another house guest's tube. If house guest tubes reach the red line, they will be eliminated. The last house guest standing will be the new head of household. The men are shocked as they are systematically eliminated one by one from the competition by the big sisters until only the women remain. Bailey and Donna quickly go out next, leaving just the hotter chocolate ladies left. Eventually, Avery and Kayla get eliminated, leaving just Lexus and Spicy V. Initially, Victoria didn't want to win, and I thought her strategy of just basically vomiting the water all at once and just being completely inaccurate was just her strategy trying to throw. But when it comes down to just her and Lexus, Victoria decides she actually does want to win, but then she still uses the same vomit strategy. This probably wouldn't be an issue normally, but Lexus is literally spraying the water like a fountain, and she's got such precision. Like she catches up so quickly here. And we go to another commercial break just because the comeback is so real. And it's like Lexus really is about to make up all that time in literally 2 shots. Spoiler alert, she doesn't actually though. And somehow Victoria's strategy finally works, securing us the pleasure of a spicy V head of household week. And we all know the antics that took place in Big Brother Canada 9 that I know we're about to get some good stuff here. Now, as they are the first 4 out, Vivek, Elijah, Dennis, and Todd are the have-nots for the week, which is Vivek's second time in a row, and he's still confused as why he is such a house target. Feeling like Bailey and Todd are targeting him, Vivek goes to Anthony, where he discusses his shock at their betrayal since they were supposed to be part of an East Coast alliance with Donna, and Dougie goes straight to Spicy V, with Vivek's hole continues to get deeper here. Now, Victoria approaches Donna to try to get some actual clarity on this alliance, but Donna doesn't say anything about it because she never actually actualized into a real alliance for her. Donna also unknowingly incriminates herself. Too late for Donna because Victoria has just lost all trust in her as well. Bailey just makes things worse when she also pushes Tola over Vivek, which turns Avery and Kayla against Bailey and Donna as well. Victoria confronts Vivek in the car, asking him to admit to his alliances, and Vivek initially says he doesn't have any other alliances than him and Anthony. But then he goes, "Oh, wait, you mean that East Coast alliance?" Which is like, oh no, Vivek, this is not a great look. Even if he genuinely forgot, it just looks so bad. Victoria then goes to Bailey and Donna, and they adamantly deny that this alliance exists. Giant confrontation between all 4, and this fight is just so good here. Also, I'm just sitting here thinking about how the hell is Victoria going to try to get out of this, because she's obviously the one who started all this drama to begin with, since no one in this group actually thought it was a real alliance. But when Vivek calls them out, Victoria actually has an amazing rebound where she's pretending to be embarrassed the whole time because Vivek misheard her and revealed the East Coast alliance when Victoria was actually referring to a completely different alliance. And it works somehow here as Vivek gets blamed for this entire situation. So Spicy V has definitely evolved here from a chaotic mess to a chaotic mess with some great plans, and these newbies are just eating it up and have no idea. We learn at this point that there's another alliance in this house, as the whole Chocolate Alliance decides to pull in Elijah and Matthew as the directors, and Victoria sells Elijah on her plans to use him as a pawn. That he agrees to. So, in nominations, there are no surprises as Spicy V puts her plans into action and nominates Elijah against the house target, Vivek, who is looking like a dead man walking at this point. Victoria says things are about to get spicy. I'm like, girl, are you saying they haven't been spicy already? Because this week has not been mild whatsoever. Now, following nominations, Vivek is feeling the heat, and with no one really to go to, he vents to Dennis, who Vivek thinks is one of his best allies. However, Dennis has a moment of realizing he's unsure of where he stands actually with Vivek, considering the nominee has had so much negative attention surrounding him lately, and Dennis wonders if distancing himself from Vivek is actually the best plan of survival. We see here it's a tale of two showmances as things continue to get deeper between Lexus and Matthew's nomads and Donna and Todd, who are starting to slowly grow a little closer here. However, the plot thickens as Victoria uses the new spy cam and sees a conversation with Donna and Todd that triggers her. It seems like Donna and Todd actually like Vivek and want to look out for him, but when they fist bump, this sends Victoria over the edge because Donna and Todd were both accused of being part of this East Coast alliance as well, and it makes it look like they're masterminding some sort of big plan in Victoria's eyes. Donna just keeps unknowingly tanking her game with Victoria, and although it's unfortunate, it kind of is actually kind of hilarious as well too, because Spicy V is just so chaotic neutral that she can kind of turn on the dime at any time here. The POV draw occurs, and as luck would have it, Vivek draws his buddy Dennis's name. Elijah picks Lexus, while Victoria gets house guest choice, choosing to round out the competitors with Avery. Vivek and Avery have a moment upstairs where Vivek celebrates with her that they have the perfect POV draw that makes sure that he can get saved, and when Donna comes in, Vivek talks about how they need to have a handshake right in front of Avery, which is like, what are you both thinking right now? Like, what? You were just both involved in this giant confrontation days earlier. Now you're talking about secret handshakes around the house? Like, there is just such a lack of self awareness here, especially doing it right in front of Avery. Oof. And Donna literally has so many strikes against her at this point, even though she has no idea that she has any strikes against her. And as Avery shares all this information with the Hot Chocolate Alliance, things get even worse here for Donna. Now, Victoria decides it's time for a backdoor week 2, realizing that if they save Vivek, he will be completely loyal to them, and he literally gets down on one knee when Victoria tells him the news. Seems like everyone in the POV is going to use the deal, but the only person where there is any sort of question surrounding them is Dennis, who is just unsure of what he wants to do if he wins. Now, Daddy Demetrius, half of my favorite showmans ever of Jamaica from Big Brother Canada 5, returns to host this week's Power Veto competition, Comp Beast Boot Camp. In this competition, house guests will maneuver 2 blocks at a time along a rope through an obstacle course and drop them in a box. After transferring all 16 of the blocks, they must arrange the blocks to solve a puzzle. The first house guest to complete the puzzle will win the power of veto. It comes down to a neck-and-neck race between Avery and Dennis as the two showdown in the puzzle, completing it within moments of each other. But it is Dennis who edges out Avery to secure his second power of veto win of the season, which is like, oof, girl, like if the target was not on you right now, Dennis, I don't know what would. Like, I don't know what the statistic is of people who win the first 2 POVs in a row that are lasting longer than like the jury at this point in the game. But you know, Dennis, you do you. So, what will Dennis do with all his power again? Well, much like last week, it feels like Dennis is just kind of doing his own thing instead of trying to use the power to really secure relationships, especially when he doesn't shore things up immediately with Victoria, which causes Victoria to get very sus of him. At the same time, Donna kind of senses something is going on because she sees Anthony meeting with the Hot Chocolate Alliance quite a bit in the HOH room, making her think something could be up finally. Just kidding, actually. Donna actually tries to convince Victoria to veto Vivek and backdoor Anthony, which is like, okay, that's the final straw here for Spicy V. Eventually, Dennis decides to have the conversation he needs to with Victoria, which at this point is already kind of too little too late because Victoria doesn't trust him at all. But she says what she needs to say to get Dennis to get him feeling comfortable going into the veto ceremony, where Dennis decides to use the power of veto to save Vivek. And in the most shocking part of it all, Victoria proceeds with her plans and names Donna as the replacement, which literally the faces of everybody is making here is just hilarious here. Donna is pissed. Elijah is like gooping himself. Victoria is crying, and Bailey is about to have a heart attack. Like, this week has been so good. Now, prior to the veto ceremony, Bailey questioned everyone, realizing how in the dark she's been about how her and Donna's actions have been viewed over the last few days. And clearly she knows she's on the outs of the Big Sisters, since they all knew about the plan except for her. Bailey is on a mission to figure out what happened and tries to call out Anthony, but Anthony kind of turns it around on Bailey, being that everyone else knew about the plan, which means that Bailey is not the victim she's pretending to be right now. There's also a random segment of them having to make either a horror or a romance movie in teams, which is kind of fun, but completely inconsequential. To the romance movie, they win here because they had Matthew and Viv as a couple, so obviously they win the 100K. Now, heading into the vote, Victoria kind of shored up most of the votes prior to the veto ceremony as well, so Donna does seem like a dead woman walking. And although she initially avoids Victoria, Donna does make a great picture to her now that the women look so splintered, no one would ever suspect them working together ever again. And this causes Victoria and the rest of the women to question if the directors was just a ploy by Anthony and Matthew to gain their trust and demolish the women's alliance. But when the votes come in, Donna finds support from Bailey, Dennis, and Todd, who all vote to evict Elijah. However, the rest of the women choose to support the Directors' Alliance, and in a vote of 7 to 3, Donna becomes the second house guest evicted from the Big Brother Canada studios. I gotta be honest, I was not expecting Donna Blindside to come this week, but I did notice how much she stuck out in the first week, being as someone who was just in everybody's ear, while also acting kind of as a power player among the newbie women. But Donna was also very blind to her position in the House following the blow-up of the East Coast Not-So Alliance, that she really failed to see how much she had lost Victoria's trust, which, to be fair, Victoria would be a nightmare to try to manage as an ally since her own mind spirals on its own, so Donna would have been interesting to see play in maybe an all-newbie season. But the vets clocked her game very early, which meant lights out in Hollywood for Donna. And if this is just a taste of what Victoria's HOHs are going to be this season, I'm just going to need her to be eligible to win every single week because this week was sensational. Like, that was what I would call an amazing week of Big Brother. Thank you for giving to us, Victoria. We should only be so lucky here. Now we begin our third week of competition with our next household competition, Steal the Spotlight, which is essentially musical chairs. It will wait in the back lot for the spotlights to turn on, with there always being one less spotlight than there are house guests currently remaining in the competition. The player who was unable to find a spotlight once it turns on is eliminated from the challenge, with the last house guest standing becoming our next head of household. However, they are also offered temptations in between rounds in order to lure them away from the backlot, including food and beer, slot passes, a safety advantage, and even a massage from Roberto Lopez from Big Brother Canada 11, which, I mean, I would be losing the competition for right now, Avery ends up sacrificing her place in the competition for a safety advantage, so in the end it comes down to Kayla and Vivek in a race for the final spotlight. And in a split-second finish, Vivek ends up snatching the spotlight first, securing head of household for the week. Vivek's first task of HOH is to name this week's have-nots, choosing to name Anthony, Bailey, Matthew, and Tola as the week's have-nots. Bailey basically spends the entire time pouting, realizing that she is the most likely to go up on the block, given she just had a public confrontation with Vivek the week prior. And that's pretty much what Vivek wants to do, is to get rid of Bailey here, with the women of the Hot Chocolate Alliance realizing they need to support the only other female outside of their alliance. Dennis has a meeting with Vivek, calling this all into question, as he feels like Vivek is playing an extremely emotional game, and is also being swayed by Anthony. Dennis is selling Anthony as the biggest threat at the nomination ceremony. Vivek does not heed Dennis's advice, deciding again to gain favor with the House by putting up Pawn Star Elijah against Bailey, who fully expected to be on the block. Following nominations, Bailey is feeling confident that she is supposed to stay up against Elijah, but also doesn't want to be on the block any longer. While Dennis still does his best to try to get Vivek to realize he needs to take the big shot at Anthony while he has the opportunity to do so. The POV draw occurs as Kayla, Dennis, and Anthony are selected for the next POV. Meanwhile, the drama comes as the directors are having a disagreement of what needs to happen with the veto, as the women all want Bailey to be safe, while Anthony wants to save Elijah. For their next power veto competition, Fun in the Sun, house guests must lay in their beach chair containing a built-in buzzer. When the horn sounds, house guests have 3 minutes to search the sand for puzzle pieces and begin building their puzzle. If a house guest prematurely releases their buzzer or fails to return to their chair before the 3 minutes are up, they will be eliminated. The first house guest to complete their puzzle will win the power of veto, as well as $5,000 from Sunwing. There's also distractions happening while they are on the chairs, tempting to them to release the key buzzer early here, including a cameo from Big Brother 5's runner-up, Karen Singbell. Now, ultimately, Kayla decides she needs to step up her game and win the veto for the Hot Chalk Alliance, and after being close in a few other competitions, Kayla builds her puzzle first and secures the power of veto for her alliance. So, what will Kayla do with all this power? Well, we already know she's pulling down Bailey, and we already know that Vivek is going to name a replacement nominee. Anthony tries to get into Vivek's ear, saying that they need to put up Dennis because that's what the house wants, which is like, yes, but Dennis literally just pulled Vivek down with the POV last week. But in an attempt to try to form an alliance, Vivek gets triple teamed by Anthony, Kayla, and Spicy V, which makes Dennis instantly sus, saying that if Dennis goes down, then Vivek will also go down the next week. So, at the veto ceremony, Kayla uses her power of veto to save Bailey, and in yet another shocking replacement nominee move, Vivek offers up his best ally Dennis to the block against Elijah in an attempt to save himself in future weeks. Now, Dennis is feeling truly betrayed here, and you could feel his hurt and anger as he's ready to burn the house down. He basically tells Vivek that he is next because of this move, to which Vivek confidently says that it won't be him. And why am I kind of hoping now that Vivek is, just because game karma? Even though I do like Vivek, there's just such a blind confidence in people that you just put them up. Like, they just put you up last week. Like, why are you having such confidence in them that they're not going to turn on you so soon? Anyway, Todd tries to give Dennis a little bit of a pep talk, being that this is exactly what happened to his girl Donna last week, while Kayla continues her A-list play as she sells some pretty believable cheers to Dennis to cover herself as a power player. Hikey, I'm really liking Kayla's gameplay, and I think she may be my favorite of the newbies at this point. Now, in a random interlude of strategy in vein of last week's movie making challenge, this week they are given a food reward from Skip if they are able to keep an egg balanced on a spoon for 30 minutes. So I guess they were forced to walk around because I would have just gone and sat on my ass on the couch somewhere, but for some reason they're like going up and down the steps and trying to eat. And Avery even tries to cook, which is like, girl, like, what are you doing? Avery expectedly drops hers, as does Elijah and Anthony, who drops with just a minute left based on his nerves and the fact he's been a have-not all week. But at least for Anthony's game, it's being served to him on a silver platter right now, so that's all that matters here. Or is it? Because Dennis is attempting to pitch himself as a weapon that the women can use to take Anthony down. And this is something that Bailey is extremely receptive to, given Elijah is a number for Anthony. Bailey sells the women on the idea, and once again the hot chocolate ladies wonder if the decision they're making is best for their game or best for Anthony. But when it comes to the vote, it doesn't seem like the momentum is there at all, and sadly, Comp Beast Dennis basically becomes the Canadian Heisem as he goes from winning 2 back-to-back POVs to being backdoored as the third house guest to leave Big Brother Canada studios. I feel bad for Dennis just because you can really feel how unexpected Vivek's betrayal was and how much it really hurt him, but I appreciate Dennis's fight just because as a superfan it's gotta be rough to be in this position. Dennis is right to feel like he does right now, feeling completely betrayed, and it sucks that his game got clocked so early as well too, because he doesn't even get to make the jury. Again, the reason why I would hate to have to play in a house with fraternity players, and it's just a different mindset you have to play because these fraternities are always going to have the power at the beginning of the game, and unless something happens immediately when they don't have power, then those who are seen as the most independent thinkers are generally going to be targeted. So sometimes it feels like it might be best to get in with them and then decide what to do later on once you have a better read of the house. But unfortunately, Dennis didn't do this. Now we begin the 4th week with another How to Household competition as always, and in this competition, no business like quiz business, they actually get to watch at the end of the eviction for once, which hasn't happened at all this season. So glad we get some traditional Big Brother. Now the house guests are asked true or false questions regarding the awards in the trophy room, being eliminated if they get the question incorrect. The last house guest standing wins head of household. Question 1 eliminates Anthony, who didn't want to win anyways, Avery, and Todd, while everyone gets question 2 correct. Question 3 eliminates Bailey, while question 4 eliminates everyone else but Elijah and Spicy V. And in question 5, Elijah and Victoria split their answers, with Elijah answering correctly, as our two-time block star now becomes our new head of household, as Spicy V throws another competition. Now, prior to head of household, Anthony is feeling very good about his position in the house, given that no one is coming for him, but little does he know that Bailey has clocked that he is good with both the men and the women's alliances. Blockstar Elijah is very concerned within his place within the Director's Alliance, given that last week Kayla saved Bailey with the POV who isn't even in their alliance, and the week before he was used as a pawn by Spicy V. So at this point Elijah is done with his game being in constant jeopardy, so when Elijah wins, Anthony knows he feels comfortable, but everyone else around him feels nervous. But really, the only four that need to be nervous are those outside the Director's Alliance, who are Bailey, Todd, Pola, and Vivek. Now, there's a mini arc here where Spicy V is beating herself up over almost winning the challenge after she wanted to throw it, which is like, oh, Victoria. Now, meanwhile, Matthew and Lexus are getting a little deeper, moving on to massages, which is like, oh, yay. Bleh. Now, all the house guests are split into two teams for the next have not competition, Milking Meadows. And in this competition, house guests must fill their mouths with milk from the bottles and then transfer it into the bucket. The team who transfers more milk after 20 minutes will win the competition. Now, they've had some pretty gross have not competitions so far this season, and this is another gross food thing, and warm milk is even like ew or gross, so I'm just like, what? But eventually, the red team of Avery, Bailey, Matthew, Lexus, and Todd is victorious. But in a twist, they get to save one member of the losing team from slop, choosing to save Anthony since he did not get a skip meal last week. This means that Kayla, Tola, Vivek, and Victoria are this week's have-nots. Having lost slop, Victoria is not sure how well she's going to be able to keep things together. I mean, were you keeping things together before this, Victoria? That's what I want to know. No. Now, we easily see how aggravated she is when she gets pissed off at Lexus and Matthew for talking during their sunbathing session, going off in private on Alexis saying she does nothing but flirt with Matthew. Victoria's already annoyed she can't get rid of Vivek, and now she has to deal with this. Now, Tola has a meeting with Elijah where he reveals that Kayla was the one campaigning for Dennis to stay last week, which shocks Elijah given that she is part of the directors with Kayla, so he isn't sure if he can 100% trust Tola. To work on things with Kayla, Elijah takes her to Wendy's, which is a perfect way to gain her trust since she's also on slop this week. Elijah reveals what Tola said, causing Kayla to deflect things back onto Tola and proclaiming that he is her number one target. Now, although Elijah wants to put up Bailey straight away, he doesn't want her to have the option to save herself directly with the veto, and instead he decides he wants two big competitors to go after the veto to make sure that it's won, choosing to put up both Todd and Tola with the promise of a backdoor in the works, even though Todd has a pretty hilarious moment where he doubles down on playing dumb and doesn't even react to Elijah nominating him. I can't tell if this is an act anymore, but it is hilarious. Now, in order to get more people against Bailey, Elijah tells Matthew that Bailey wants one of Alexis or Matthew up to break up the showmance, with the emphasis being that it would likely be Matthew as her target before Alexis. So now Matthew is ready for Bailey to go as well, which makes things even more ironic because Elijah picks Bailey for the POV competition. Todd picks Anthony while Tola picks Lexus to round up competitors. Before the competition, Matthew goes to share his earlier conversation with Elijah about Bailey to both Anthony and Lexus, but things get a little weird when Kayla walks in and Lexus, who was about to make a comment, just stops talking instead, giving Kaylee the idea that Anthony, Lexus, and Matthew are working together. Kayla wants to make sure that she is being heard by her alliance, so she confronts Anthony while he's having a conversation with both Vivek and Victoria, which is kind of awkward because we forget that these four were supposed to be in a fake alliance last week that Vivek thinks is real. Anthony seems more annoyed by Kayla voicing her opinion to her alliance than he does by Tola saying her name, so Kayla really starts to question where her alliance is truly stand. Next competition for Power of Veto, Game Day, which is clearly inspired by the early 2000s TV show Dog. House guests were presented with a challenge at the start of each round. Players will privately bid how quickly they believe they can complete a task. The house guest who bids the lowest will have to complete the task within the time that they bid. If they succeed, that player can eliminate anybody else from the competition, but if they fail, they themselves will be eliminated. The last house guest standing will win the Power of Veto, as well as $5,000 from Tony Bet. In round 1, Sink Your Shot, Players must sink a hole-in-one on a mini golf course with a windmill. Anthony doesn't want to win the power of veto, so he's constantly betting high, while Bailey is ready for some power, wagering the shortest time by like 4 minutes with a minute 40. And with just over 20 seconds left on the clock, she completes her challenge, deciding to eliminate Tola first from the competition. In the next round, pickleball pushover, they must use a pickleball launcher to knock down 6 targets, and believing she has great accuracy, Lexus takes on the challenge, wagering 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Also, with just over 20 seconds left, Lexus completes the challenge in her time limit and eliminates the other nominee, Todd. In round 3, spinning sums, they must toss 3 darts onto a spinning dartboard with numbers on them adding up to the sum of 60 points. Lexus decides to throw the competition this time as she thinks both Anthony and Lexus will take her, and since Anthony is throwing basically all the time, it's Bailey who takes it on with 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And again, with coming around just 20 seconds or so left on the clock, Bailey crushes the competition despite a rocky start and chooses to take Lexus to the final competition. In the final round, Slinging Slappers, which is played in a head-to-head competition on both sides opposite of a hockey rink, they will need to launch their pucks through one of 3 small holes in the midline of the rink. The first player to slingshot all of their pucks through the other side of the rink will win. And it seems like there's a difference of opinion here as Bailey would rather have Todd in the game, while Alexis would rather keep Tola around since he is less threatened by the existence of the showmance. Eventually, Lexus figures out the slingshot first and starts sending them one by one through the other side, winning the power of veto. Now, Lexus, with all of his power, decides she wants to save Tola, but she feels like she needs to have a conversation with Elijah first, who kind of wants the opposite and wants Todd to be saved so Bailey can go up. But Matthew actually has a good counterpitch to Elijah as well that Bailey isn't even a director, so why was she taken off the block and why did Elijah have to stay up as the pawn? Which Elijah gets from his conversation that Anthony, Lexus, and Matthew are trustworthy, whereas Victoria, Kaylee, and Avery, not so much. But Elijah brings this information right to the women, and it kind of seems like he trusts them more so than the showmance. And it's like, oop, is Matthew now in the firing line? Because realizing that the directors are splitting in two, Spicy V is not ready to show her cards yet. So she makes a last minute plea to Alexis to not use that power of veto, and it seems like it resonates most with Alexis as she chooses not to do that, leaving Todd and Tola on the block. But there is an ominous ending to the episode where we hear the breaking of glass, and Tola discovers that the executive veto has been stolen. However, before the hostile takeover begins, let's flash forward 48 hours as the Directors' Alliance continues to fall apart as Elijah confronts Lexis about the misinformation spread in the house, leading to Elijah revealing that Spicy P said that she would put up the showmances. But the showmances obviously trust Spicy V more, meaning that Elijah is now Spicy's target once the information gets revealed to her. This definitely splits the house as Avery, Bailey, Kayla, and Spicy V are 4 votes for Todd, but they're worried that he is very lax and needs a 5th vote. And the women tell Todd that he has to get Anthony on his side, or they can't make the move to save him, but this also means Anthony has to turn on one of his own members. But will all the strategy even matter? Because it's time for the boardroom. In order to get the executive veto, they must survive the chain of rejection. Starting with head of household Elijah, they will each choose one house guest they do not want to see have this power. The last house guest standing will be the executive veto holder. Elijah goes first, rejecting Tola from the power. Tola denies power to Bailey, who chooses to eliminate Vivek. Vivek adds Todd to the chain of rejection, who picks Lexus. Lexus chooses Matthew, who chooses Kayla. Kayla decides to give Anthony no power, but gives him the choosing power to decide who gets the power between Avery and Victoria, choosing to ultimately reject Avery and make Spicy V the holder of the executive veto. And we learn here what the executive power is. As the executive veto power is used, then the veto nominee that was saved with the power will be the one who has to get the blood on their hands, naming the replacement nominee, not the veto holder, not the head of household. Ow. Now this causes some drama because Anthony wants Tola saved, but Bailey is worried that Tola is going to say her name. The women agree that they can't risk Bailey going up, and after selling herself the best to Spicy V, knowing exactly who she wants up, Todd actually gets saved by Victoria as he names Vivek as the replacement nominee, which is like, Number one, karma from Dennis last week. And number two, did this guy even have one confessional this week? I don't think he did. I don't think the editors had any idea Vivek would be in any sort of trouble this week. They literally did not give this guy one confessional the whole week. And now here he is being nominated and likely going to be evicted. Vivek does attempt some last minute scrambling in the few minutes after the board meeting, but it seemingly falls on deaf ears as the public vote, because they have to vote in public here, reveals that everyone has chosen to save Tola, evicting Vivek in a unanimous 8-0 vote. Now, wow. What another shocking week of Big Brother Canada. Gotta say, the season is hitting all the right spots as everyone is playing hard, and I don't really see anyone that's left that's kind of slacking here. It's kind of hilarious that Vivek was literally this close to making his move almost pay off for him, which, sorry, the executive veto decided otherwise here. It's kind of sad because I do genuinely really like Vivek and he seemed like a really good person, but he just didn't seem to have a very good player instinct here. And he was in hot water from the very first week for things that he didn't even do. Like he definitely has had to have one of the roughest roads from anybody I've seen and anybody leaving in the pre-jury here. His exit in the last second is just the cherry on top of a very poor malted singing. This is just so tragic. Like I would be so sad if I was him to enter the house and have his journey here, but I didn't, and I got to watch it. So I could just sit here and say, Vivek, I'm sorry, that was tragic. But wow, was that not entertaining? We open week 6 with a flashback scene prior to the last eviction as the Hot Chocolate Alliance is completely at a standoff prior to the last vote. As we learn that Anthony didn't really care that any of the other hot chocolate girls, other than Lexus, have protection from inside of the house, which is a fair point, but Anthony definitely is going to do whatever he wants to do, so it kind of feels like this could possibly be the breaking point of this alliance. Especially because Anthony feels Spicy showed all her cards using the executive veto on Todd instead of Tola like Anthony wanted. I don't really get Anthony's argument either, just because he is working with, hot chocolate, as he said. So if you are going to be loyal to this alliance, then why does it matter that you're going to end with 4 women? Yes, I know it is 4 women that are more likely to send each other over themselves, but you knew that getting into the alliance, so why did you even, play with it as hardcore as it seems like we're making the seem at this point? I don't know. I don't think anybody really is that into hot chocolate, but at the same time, it feels like they're all playing like they're that into hot chocolate, but this doesn't feel like it's like the second coming of the cookout here, as far as I'm concerned. But I also, it's just a situation where I don't want to imply that some people are taking it seriously, but it's also a situation that it's just we really could use the feeds here to kind of, help out in these sort of situations and fill in these gaps. But so a lot of this is just speculation, and a lot of I think what happens in the situation just goes on based off what your perception is of these people. I personally kind of get a much more negative opinion of Anthony throughout most of the situations here because it feels like a lot of the times when we're seeing them share information, it feels like it's Victoria going to him with these kind of conversations and saying what she's kind of thinking from her side of the house, but I don't really feel like we see many conversations initiated from his side, and it just kind of looks like selfish on his end that he's kind of looking for an excuse to break the alliance. And there's definitely 4 guys in the firing line before him, versus there's only 4 women in the Hot Chocolate Alliance and 1 woman outside, which is Bailey. So I see both sides of the argument here. It's just so awkward as far as this game goes because it feels like, again, Anthony and Victoria, although they pledge allegiance on day one, it doesn't ever feel here like they ever really mean it. But, this is all again speculation because we don't have the feeds, Big Brother Canada. Our next household competition, What's Shaking, we get a 50 soda shop aesthetic, which I love. And here in this competition, the house guests have 30 seconds to slide 3 milkshakes down a table into scoring sections. If they're unhappy with their score, they can try again. The house guest with the highest score will be the new head of household. After Anthony throws yet another head of household, Avery manages to secure the top score of 36, leading the rest of the house guests attempting to beat her score, but no one does. And Avery becomes our next head of household, which is like, yas, hot chocolate girlies, get it? Little did I know this would be my last moments of happiness in this game, though. Avery wants an easy week to try to keep the hot chocolate together, initially wanting to target Elijah, but when Anthony says the girls need to keep distant, otherwise it looks like they're starting to work together. And this Anthony versus the ladies divide is continuing to grow here. Speaking of divides, Kayla still feels a bit wary of Matthew based on the fact that he eliminated her in the chain of rejection. Kayla pitches to Spicy, who pitches the idea to Avery that Elijah is a waste of a week, and they need to force the other side to have to pick between Matthew and Tola. Prior to Noms, Big Brother provides some drinks, and the final 10 have a party. But Victoria uses the opportunity to try to get Todd on her side completely as she suggests a final 3 of Victoria, Todd, and Bailey, which is like, gasp! We already knew that this alliance between Victoria and Anthony is not working here, and now she's already making another final 3 alliance. Also suggesting to Todd that maybe she should take the shot at Anthony, because she can't do it. Avery takes Lexus to Wendy's to try to gauge Lexus' investment in an alliance in the event Matthew was to go. So this is where Lexus realizes, although she trusts the stability of the guys a lot more, that she's going to eventually have to pick a side between the guys and the girls. However, wanting to try to delay Hot Chocolate having a civil war for as long as possible, Avery decides to take the easy route here, nominating Elijah and Tola for eviction. Following nominations, there's a funny scene where Victoria and Avery are talking in the HOH room, and they see Elijah about to come in via the spy screen, so Victoria goes to hide in the bathroom while they have their conversation. Kayla enters as Elijah leaves, and the trio discuss Anthony's sketchiness, but it turns out this is all just a smokescreen for Victoria, who's just trying to keep all of her bases covered in order for her and Anthony to take it to the end, supposedly here. Bailey, Lexus, and Spicy get picked for the power of veto, which prompts Bailey to begin pushing for Matthew. But Avery kind of toys with the idea to put up Anthony, not to send him home, but to scare him a bit. Plus, it's tit for tat when he put her up. The girls immediately talk her out of it, instead suggesting perhaps Matthew. But Avery has a very close game relationship with him, so she's not sure she wants him to leave on her head household. Now, in the next power veto competition, Rush Away, house guests must retrieve their teeth from a pool of gunk using their stick and carry it over a beam. They must then brush the tooth clean, carry it back to their mouth, and balance it on their ledge. In addition, if a house guest chooses, they could balance 3 teeth on their smaller ledge to freeze a competitor for 2 minutes. The first house guest to balance 25 teeth on their mouth will win the power of veto, as well as $5,000 from Sonicare. Totally immediately goes for the freeze power, deciding to pause Elijah for 2 minutes, but it didn't really seem worth it to me, but to each their own. It seems like Tola and Bailey figure out the technique the fastest, getting the early lead over the others. But this competition turns extremely tricky as it's very easy to knock over their stacks, as Bailey soon finds out, forcing her to start over and giving Tola the clear lead. Lexus starts to make up some time at the end, but ultimately Tola is able to place his 25th tooth first, securing the power of veto and his safety for the week, while Elijah starts to think that his goose is cooked. So what will Tola do with all this power? Well, we obviously know he's going to use it on himself, so Avery is faced with making another nominee when she was determined not to. Todd initially is the name that Anthony wants as the replacement, but Avery is worried about doing that because there's obvious benefits to keeping Goose in the game. Kayla seems only worried about herself as the target and kind of flips during their conversation because she can tell that Avery is uncomfortable with Matthew going up, which pisses Victoria off and causes the girls to kind of unravel a bit. Avery especially gets annoyed at Anthony and Lexus about their last conversation, causing her to not want to include them in on Kayla and Victoria's plans anymore. Despite Anthony trying to coach Matthew on what to do to keep him safe, Avery is determined to do what she thinks is best for the hot chocolate girlies, deciding to put Matthew up as the replacement nominee, giving them the big move they all wanted. So, in short, this week basically comes down to what will Spicy do, as she continues to try to navigate the vote. As this week's vote is pretty clearly telegraphed to be Victoria's decision, with Avery, Bailey, Elijah, Kayla, and Todd on one side, and Anthony, Lexus, Matthew, and Tola on the other. It does kind of seem like the writing is on the wall for Matthew since Victoria was basically pushing for him to go up all week, and she's been dropping hints to Anthony she may evict him, so it kind of seems like her mind is already made up, more than the edit wants us to think. Lexus starts to feel betrayed, given that she's been nothing to loyal to Hot Chocolate, and makes a plea to the other girlies to keep Matthew and get rid of Elijah, as this would keep both sides of the Hot Chocolate Alliance with 2 shields each. But Victoria is ready to make moves that benefit her, and when the time comes to cast her vote, she ultimately decides to go against the wishes of Anthony, evicting Lexus's boo thing Matthew in a 4-3 vote. Now, to be honest, other than being hot, Matthew really didn't do too much this season other than hang out with the boys and flirt with Lexus, so this isn't the most terrible move for me. I don't really have much to say about him actually in that regard, but I am rooting for Lexus. It's exciting to see her have a very Lisa Donahue-esque arc set up for her. Will she be the Mistress of Darkness 2.0 and avenge her boo? So they warned us that the movie Night Massacre is coming, and I'm so excited, but the remix of the opening credits kind of caught me off guard at first. I think I genuinely had to do like a double take when I saw the killer behind Todd for a second. Speaking of Todd, he goes to Tola after the previous eviction, where they place a lot of the blame of leaked information on Kayla, while Victoria is determined to prove to Anthony and Lexus that she does want to work with them. Now, late in the night, though, everyone gets the same message that we were played in the intro, as everyone is told they'll have to gather their belongings and seek shelter in the head household room until further notice. When the lockdown is over, the house has been turned into a movie theater from hell, as Arissa explains the rules for their competition. House guests must balance a jar on 2 lengths of the chain. In addition, they will have to have their head trapped in a glass chamber, restricting their movement. The winner would be safe from the massacre and have control of the game. In addition, the order in which they will drop will decide the order in which they will cast rules for each other. Something they don't tell them here is that things will be falling on their heads, and the first drop of blood that comes out of the thing startles Kayla so bad to the point where she's the first person to drop, meaning she will get no decision to cast a roll here. Elijah drops pretty quickly after, while another unexpected squirt of blood takes out Avery. Spicy V eventually drops next, while Anthony goes out in 5th place. Lexus eventually can't hold on any longer and gets 4th place, while Todd goes out in 3rd, leaving a face-off between Bailey and Tola as they last over an hour and 20 minutes. Bailey seems super confident, and rightfully so, as Tola can't outlast her, dropping out in 2nd and giving Bailey her first competition win of the season. Now this is where we learn the rules here of the Movie Night Massacre, or in the order that they dropped out, starting with Bailey first. They will go into a room to pick roles. Based off of the situation here, they will pick 1 person as head of household, 2 people as a nominee, 3 people as players in the veto, and then 1 player will be cast to not get an eviction vote at all. Bailey, because she won the competition, will be safe and will not be included, but she will be the first person to cast a roll, choosing to make Victoria head of household. Tola goes next, deciding to nominate Kayla. 3rd place Todd decides to ensure Kayla's eviction by nominating Avery against her. Lexus decides to put Tola in the power of veto, while Anthony takes away Elijah's eviction vote. Victoria is all sorts of thrown off that she literally falls over when the scary instruction guy gives over the rules to her, ultimately deciding to give Anthony the slot. This leaves Avery and Elijah to put Alexis and Todd into the power of veto. Arissa reveals the rules, which leaves Kayla in tears as she realizes she is now on the block for the first time against fellow Hot Chocolate member Avery. On their next power reveal competition, Bloodthirsty, house guests must drink 3 glasses of blood to reveal numbers at the bottom of the glasses. They must use those 3 numbers to unlock a combination lock, releasing their puzzle pieces. The first house guest to correctly complete their puzzle will win the power of veto. It's a pretty quick competition, but it turns out to be a 2-man race between Kayla and Tola. Tola keeps saying he's got it, but he don't got it because Kayla was feeling the pressure of being on the block, keeping a cool and calm demeanor. She solves the puzzle first, securing her safety, which is all sorts of interesting now because head of household Victoria will now be responsible for naming Kayla's replacement nominee. So, what will Spicy do with all this power? Well, immediately Tola and Todd come up with a pretty good cover story that Elijah is the target, but since he's good at puzzles, they nominated him right away. And unsurprisingly, here in a pretty not surprising situation here at all. Everyone decides to turn on Elijah, so Victoria decides to put Elijah on the block, and he is the first member of her jury in a unanimous vote. Now, the main problem for Elijah for me in this game is the fact that he became a Pawn Star far too early, and it feels like once you become the easy replacement, it's very difficult to get that stigma off of you, especially since he did such a bad job during his own head of household of changing anyone's opinion on him. I feel like the whole Goose nickname too, while respectful, does kind of show that no one really took Elisha all that seriously. Ultimately, his journey lands him in ninth place, which I feel is fair considering the other 8 are bringing more drama to the table now, so all things considered, I'm satisfied with the movie night massacre twist. On his way out, he whispers in Kayla's ear that anyone who sits next to Spicy goes home, and since episode 19 is literally only a third of the way over once Elijah leaves, this means we are getting a treat with a second eviction this week. Avery is ready for some revenge, while Kayla is feeling frustrated by Spice's decision Tula, as well as Eliza's message to Fear sitting next to her ally on eviction night. But Anthony feels the most secure in Victoria he has in weeks, apparently, since she did not put up Tola. In their next head of household competition, the house guests will play in the head-to-head matches of a game called Back to the Drawing Board. In each round, they're shown a pattern using their blocks indicated on their board. The first player to buzz in with the correct pattern will eliminate their opponent and advance. However, if they buzz in and have the pattern incorrect, they themselves will be eliminated, and their opponent will advance instead. The winner of the match will then select the next 2 house guests to face off, with the last house guest standing become the new head of household. A random draw pits Todd and Tola in the first match, which takes them almost 30 minutes. This is just insane here, but Todd eventually gets the win. Todd puts Avery against Kayla in the next round, with Avery smashing it within like 20 seconds, which is just like a completely reversal of the first round here. Anthony then quickly eliminates Todd, while Avery eliminates Bailey in the next round. Anthony buzzes in incorrectly on purpose in the next round, allowing Alexis to move on in the final against Avery. Clearly just dominating this challenge from start to finish, Avery easily wins the competition, becoming the first person to win 2 head of households this season, since Spicy was technically handed her second head of household win. And immediately it seems like this could be a bad thing for Avery, as the others are starting to catch on to how good she is at kind of all types of competitions here. Based on what happened at the movie night massacre, Avery names both Todd and Tola as her targets and eventually names them both as her nominees. Bailey, Kayla, and Lexus get picked to play in the veto, as Bailey decides if she wants to win the veto since she may take Todd off the block. Kayla also thinks Bailey may be onto hot chocolate after walking into the meeting last week, putting her name into the air as a possible replacement nominee. At the same time, Bailey learns from Todd that Lexus was okay with taking a shot at Avery, and this information shakes Bailey's trust in Lexus. Bailey tells this information to Spicy, who tells this info to Avery, and now all of a sudden it seems like hot chocolate could be ready to just turn on itself, especially because Spicy starts to realize her biggest threats could now be her hot chocolate girlies. Spicy reveals all of this drama to Anthony and says Lexus needs to possibly go. But knowing Lexus is closer to him than she is to Victoria, Anthony knows he cannot lose Lexus, and he needs to get Spicy to turn on one of her own people. A flashback to the night of the massacre, where Kayla reveals to Anthony what Elijah said about Spicy. And it's a bad look for Kayla, because Kayla never told Spicy what Elijah said to begin with, which makes Victoria instantly turn on her ally, while Anthony cannot help but laugh out loud that his move worked. On their next power veto competition of the week, Off the Grid, house guests must navigate down their lane, trying not to knock off any of the power rods blocking their path. If they knock off a rod, they must reset it and start again. However, they must go down their lane blindfolded. Once they're at the other end, they may remove their blindfold and begin building their puzzle. However, they must build their puzzle using only their sense of touch. The first house guest to solve their puzzle will win the power of veto. Bailey, Kayla, and Lexus are chosen to compete alongside Todd and Tola. Todd learns, of course, getting to the puzzle first, but he feels like he'll need extra time because he says he's terrible at puzzles, even when he can see them. Kayla gets through the course second, while Bailey gets through the very last beam and kicks it over, but she ultimately completes it on her next attempt, over quickly shortly by Tola here. Lexus is the last person on the beams course, and she also has a Bailey moment where she knocks over the very last beam and has to go back another time before she finishes. It comes down to a three-person race in the puzzle between Bailey, Todd, and Tola, and Bailey secures her safety with another competition. So, what will Bailey do with all this power? Well, being that she's close to Todd, obviously Bailey is saving Todd, which prompts Spicy to feed the info to Avery that Anthony dropped on Kayla that Kayla is playing all sides, which prompts Avery to want to put up her bestie. To add fuel to the fire, Anthony feeds Lexus misinformation that she was the backdoor target, and then sends Lexus to make sure Spicy is still on the plan to get Kayla out. It's funny though that Bailey sees through the plan entirely when Spicy comes up to tell her, until Lexus doubles down on what she said to Bailey. Eventually, everybody is on board after Bailey pulls Todd off the block, and Avery throws Kayla in this where everybody is throwing their best friends out of this game, and I'm just like, what is this gameplay? Now, Kayla is shocked following her replacement nominee and calls a house meeting where she tries to defend herself against a house that is turned completely against her. It's kind of crazy how quick it all turned on Kayla, especially when the info against her is so flaky, but Bailey generally has a reason to be upset because Kayla did suggest her as a possible backdoor target. Kayla tries a last minute plea to her hot chocolate girlies that Anthony and Alexis are lying in an attempt to break them all up. But sadly, it falls on deaf ears as the entire house unanimously evicts Kayla in yet another cray-cray eviction vote. Oh, wow, wow, wow. Did Kayla's game just blow up within a matter of a week? Which is crazy because the whole reason Matthew was evicted, but really it had the exact opposite effect, which is sad because I liked Kayla in the first few portions of the game, where it seemed like she was really gaming, but there was a sense of panic in her over the last few weeks of the game that gave her an air of flakiness that her allies really sensed. I definitely kind of smacked my head though because we all knew that Anthony was gonna pull something on the hot chocolate girlies, and I wish it would have been the ones to strike first at Anthony last week instead of Matthew. But once this mug it was filled with hot chocolate, now lays shattered on the floor in ruins and the tears of fans everywhere. In their next head household competition, Big Brother Canada Fitness Factory, house guests must balance a ball on their plank, and the platform is connected to their hips, so they must sway back and forth to keep the ball balanced. At some point in the competition, they will switch to a bigger ball. If the house guest drops their ball, they'll be eliminated. The last house guest standing will be the new head of household, and secretly earn the ability to have a strategy session with Season 10 winner Kevin Jacobs. Now, Victoria and Bailey, as well as Anthony, although he has the slot pass, are the first three eliminated, and Victoria and Bailey become the have-nots for the week. Lexus soon falls out after, leaving a face-off between Todd and Tola, who get moved up after almost 2.5 hours of swaying back with the first ball. But after almost 3 hours and 17 minutes, Todd cannot control the larger ball anymore and drops, giving Tola his first head of household of the season. Now, Anthony and Lexus celebrate with Tola, meaning the other half of the house is likely going to be vulnerable here, especially as Tola has declared Avery as his target, because she's nominated him both times she won head of household. And it's also kind of cray because if she leaves, then that means everybody that's standing in the house photo on the wall is eliminated, which is just such a random storyline here. Tola has his strategy conversation with Kevin, and Kevin is giving good advice, but I have no idea how receptive Tola is to it because, it's Tola. Anthony is ready to continue to dismantle Hot Chocolate, agreeing to target Avery over Bailey, especially now that Bailey is ready to work with Anthony versus work against him. Avery does try to push the target onto Todd a little bit, but ultimately Anthony gets what he wants when Tola follows through on his plan and nominates Avery and Bailey for eviction. Now, following the nomination ceremony, Bailey is pissed off at Tola for his speech, saying that he is faster, stronger, and smarter than Bailey, to the point where Bailey questions working with Tola in the future because it felt like, quote, the words of an enemy. According to Bailey, However, we learn from Anthony, although Spicy is his number one, Bailey is now his number two, and he gives her extra reassurance to make sure she knows that she's safe. And as much as Bailey says she doesn't believe him, she also seems like she does believe him too. Anthony, Todd, and Victoria get picked for the power of veto, and Victoria is starting to freak out a little bit because she knows that she wants to work with Todd, but she would rather have Avery or Bailey off and around there, so if Todd wins and takes Bailey off, Victoria thinks that she can go up. Victoria instead tries to push Todd's name as the replacement, not her. Meanwhile, Victoria's lies are starting to catch up to her as Anthony secures on a plan to make a big move if the power veto is used. Their next power veto competition, Eyes on the Sky, houseguests must watch a monitor and use their clicker to count the number of shooting stars they see in the sky. During the competition, Big Brother will make them offers on which they could bid using their alarm clock. However, if they win a bid, they must wear a blindfold for the length of time equal to their bid. The houseguest with the most accurate count will win the power of veto. Spicy ends up taking the first temptation, which is a phone call from home, while Anthony takes the second temptation for $5,000. Avery, Bailey, and Todd are all locked in, but with the most accurate count, it's Todd that wins the power of veto. So, what will Todd do with all this power? Well, that decision kind of comes down to Bailey to some degree, who finds herself in a very weird strategic position in the game. Now, Victoria and Bailey have a conversation where Victoria is near tears for her allies to be in this position of peril. Bailey feels good that Todd would likely save her, but they also know that if a replacement nominee goes up, more than likely it would be Spicy as the replacement. So she wants off the block, but Bailey realizes it might be better for her to stay up and for Avery to go. Todd gets word from Tola that he wants nominations to stay. Todd also wants to repay the favor to Bailey for saving him with the power of veto. Bailey and Todd have a discussion about the pros and cons of using the power of veto, with Todd ultimately deciding not to use the power of veto, as Bailey decides to take the risk and sit next to Avery on eviction night. Heading into the vote, both ladies feel safe since everyone is playing all sides, although the tides are clearly moving towards Avery since it has been all week with her blissfully unaware. But towards the end of the week, it seems like Anthony kind of hints to Avery that she likely could go home, since Anthony doesn't want to show his cards if he doesn't have to. When the votes come in, Victoria is the sole vote to keep her ally Avery, as she is the first evictee of the night, up in a 3-1 vote. Yep, that's right, of the night, because tonight is a double eviction. But before that, let's talk about Avery, because another hot chocolate girly gone. This alliance is dissolving before our eyes, and I'm bummed for Avery. She was a lot of fun to watch and had a lot of positive energy about her. It just seems so weird considering so much of the early game was kind of built up around hot chocolate to see them leave all early to mid jury. It's just cray cray. I'm not sure I expected Avery to win, more so be like a losing finalist to Spicy or Anthony, and it feels very unexpected to see her leave at this point. But she also turned on Kayla last week, and it feels like she got her Big Brother candidate 12 turn on your best ally Justice when it was vindicated. So, I get it. This jury house is going to be so hilarious to watch if we ever get clips. In their next head of household competition of the night, house guests must run through the house to witness a marathon of past house guests running around the top floor. They must count the sum of the numbers of the racers' bibs and only have 3 minutes to lock in an answer. The house guest with the closest count will be the new head household. In the end, it seems like everyone just kind of guesses with their best guess, and with the closest answer, Victoria secures her third head of household of the win, which is hilarious because she literally just guesses 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, Tola is the main target here after a conversation with Bailey, though Victoria does not have many other options who'd put next to him, as she's concerned and only has the commercial break to strategize. Although Alexis throws out Todd, Bailey wisely counters that if Todd is up against Tola, then Alexis and Anthony are not going to vote for Tola. So to ensure Tola goes, Victoria decides to nominate Alexis against him. Everybody goes out to the backyard to compete in the next power veto competition, while Victoria can only watch as the other 5 compete. In this competition down the drain, house guests must tilt and turn their bathtub to make 25 bubbles fall down the drain. The first house guest to empty their tub and hit their buzzer will win the power of veto. Bailey and Todd seem to get the lead in this competition, with Todd having yet another random skill in his pocket of tricks, managing to maneuver all the balls down the drain first, securing his second power veto in a row. So, what will Todd do with all his power? He goes to Anthony and Victoria thinking it would be in everyone's best interest to keep them safe, which makes Anthony have a moment where he cries to himself in the bathroom, knowing his buddy is about to leave, as Alexis and Tola prepare to face the vote. With only 3 players voting, we get right into it, and there's no surprises even as Anthony sees the writings on the wall here. Tola is voted out in a unanimous 3-0 vote, leaving us with our final 5 house guests. I gotta say, I wasn't a huge fan of Tola throughout the season, although I didn't dislike him either. I don't think I really got too much on him. He didn't really get featured too heavily for me, just based on the fact that his spot in the game was pretty obvious as Anthony's main shield, which wasn't a bad shot to be in, but it's also not a winning spot either, as we've seen here. Tola is one of the house guests that I think could have really benefited from the live feeds, just to get more on his perspective of things. The times we did get some life stories out of Tola, he was able to share some of his backstory, and if we were to get like more moments like that with him, I think we really could have benefited popularity wise. But unfortunately, this is Big Brother Candy reality we live in now without the live feed. So hopefully Tola got what he needed out of this experience because it wasn't based on the edit. So I have no idea. We start week 9 with a recap of the double eviction night, with most of the drama being Anthony and Lexus feeling burned by Victoria after she did nothing but talk about how Todd needed to go last week, and then didn't even attempt to put him on the block, while Bailey is sensing that her number one spicy also may not completely have her back, since Victoria voted to keep Avery over Bailey 2 evictions ago. Victoria confronts Anthony prior to the head household to make sure they are still solid, to which Anthony says they are, but little does Victoria know that this last move completely shattered all trust Anthony had in Victoria. Lexus is done with Victoria as well too, given that she was just nominated by her, so things for Victoria are definitely looking a little spicy this week, given she can't even compete for head of household. The next head of household competition, Nepo Babies. House guests must listen to a series of speeches given by the house guests throughout the season, but the speeches are morphed to sound as if they're babies. They must identify who gave each speech, and in each correct answer they get will earn them a point. House guest with the most points after 5 quotes will be the next head of household. Everyone gets question 1 right except Todd, while Bailey is the only one to get question 2 right. Bailey immediately gets the next question wrong, while everyone else gets it right though, evening Anthony, Bailey, and Lexus back up at 2 points. Question 4 also only goes to Bailey though, and she has the lead going into the last question. Anthony is the only person, though, to correctly identify Matthew's speech in the last question, meaning it will come down to a tiebreaker between Anthony and Bailey. Coming closer in the tiebreaker question is Anthony that secures his second head of household win of the season and securing his place in the final 4. Now, the first part of Anthony's plan is to turn all of Victoria's allies against her, starting with Bailey. Anthony tries to sell putting her and Todd on the block with the backdoor of Victoria, but sort of backfires a bit because Bailey is very adamant that if she is Anthony's number 1, then she should not be going on the block ever, because who puts their number 1 on the block? Anthony. I would say the entire cast of Survivor 46 and the majority of this cast, but that's for another video. Now, Anthony takes Victoria to Wendy's, where Victoria continues to pledge her loyalty to Anthony, who is just strangely silent when he's sitting there, just based on the edit. Mostly just because Anthony was kind of using the situation so he could build up more ammunition against Spicy, apparently, telling Todd that Victoria was saying he's disposable to him at Wendy's. This makes Bailey and Todd really question their trust in Victoria. Anthony makes his final pitch to Alexis for her to be the last pawn on the board needed to make Victoria secure she won't be the replacement nominee. With Alexis okay with being a pawn, this allows Anthony to really secure his loyalty in Bailey by not putting her on the block, as Anthony's final nominees are Alexis and Todd, with Victoria completely oblivious that the back door is waiting open for her. Following nominations, Victoria's target is Todd, and her goal is to pretend to feel freaked out about getting backdoored, which is funny considering Todd is in on Anthony's plan and knows how freaked out Victoria really should be right now, as he's still playing dumb as well. Bailey is really struggling with this decision though, and even though there's like a lot of evidence that clearly supports to Victoria playing for herself and not supporting Bailey, Bailey still does believe in their ride or die relationship, although Victoria does mention to Anthony that Bailey might need to go if Todd comes off. Victoria continues to uphold her image with Anthony that she's still all-star strong, and she's definitely walking around saying she's Final Four, and it's like, kind of awkward. She's really selling right now that she believes her main goal this whole time has been sitting with Anthony in the finals, which is a little cringe since we know she's kind of telling everybody the same thing, which is fine. I love spicy and I'm all here for the messiness, but also kind of annoying because Anthony has been kind of doing the same thing too, but been kind of also not admitting to it either. So I'm just like, what are y'all doing? This is another reason I wish we could have the feed so we could really see the truth, what they're actually choosing to show us. So, what is fact, but Victoria's conversation with Lexus goes right back to the others, which continues her downfall. Now, they have to compete in their next competition, the Socialite, which house guests must conquer three different games. They must first stack their ice cubes while keeping their glass stable. Once they complete it, they must toss strawberries into their drink. Afterwards, they must roll their ball along their lime and into its hole. They can then use the opportunity to study the maze of pipes that leads to 10 glasses. One of it has the veto in front of it. They must choose the drink from above, hoping to pour the drink that leads into the veto. If they guess incorrectly, they must conquer the games again before pouring another drink. The house guest who pours the drink leading into the veto necklace first will win the power of veto, as well as $5,000 from Socialite. This competition turns out to be much more of a marathon than a sprint, as the final choice at the end really matters the most. For example, Todd and Lexus end up getting through the course the fastest, but their mistakes in picking the correct can send them all the way back after 90 minutes of playing to get to that point. They were really worried because Victoria was stuck on the lime task and they just wanted to make sure they could complete the final maze before she got the shot. Meanwhile, Anthony literally takes the first 90 minutes just stacking his ice cubes, which is hilarious. He gets through the rest of the course quick, but then he doesn't even attempt to solve the maze before he just picks the wrong answer. Lexus and Todd eventually get back to the maze at the same time, with Victoria still not able to conquer the lime, but this time Todd manages to pick the right hand, securing his third power of veto win in a row, as well as his place in the final four. So, what will Todd do with all this power? Well, the plan is, as our All Stars have had two very different cameras here, Victoria tells the cameras that it's on Bailey, while Anthony wonders how he could be humble since he is so perfect and never misses. I cringe. Victoria tries to sell Anthony her final threes, them and Lexus, and we literally get an almost 10-minute long confrontation as Victoria begins to realize her game is on the line and pleads her case to Anthony that she was never turning people against Anthony. But we get a cliffhanger ending as Anthony confronts Bailey, looking for the final clarification on what it was that Victoria said about it. Well, we all knew that Anthony was kind of looking for any excuse to turn on Spicy, and he gets it. So when Todd uses the power veto to save himself, the replacement nominee is officially Victoria, and fans collectively across North America scream in disgust. So, despite Spicy's best pleading, it seems like none of the other four really believe her anymore, so it doesn't really seem like her campaigning is really working since it's falling on deaf ears. We finally get a jury segment, though, out of the first four jurors coming together, which is always fun. Victoria tries one last time to get through to Anthony, but their conversation devolves quickly into a fight as Spicy smashes a glass jar on the ground, and both of them would start yelling at the top of their lungs. But once again, the writing is on the wall for yet another week, and although she calls out Anthony's betrayal of Big Bucks, whatever that was, and hot chocolate, both it's not enough for Miss Spicy V as she leaves in fifth place as our fifth juror. My winner pick, no. I mean, let's be real, everything did fall apart around midway through the season, but Spicy V could easily be one of my favorite players to watch of all time. She goes balls to the walls every time she plays, so much that I don't even think she even remembers half the shit she did in the season, but I will always respect a player that goes hard, and that's why Spicy will always be one of my favorites. Sadly, everything kind of fell apart when Victoria cast a vote for Bailey, plus when she sold Todd out over Avery and Bailey the week before, but for being one of the most chaotic players of all time, I'm happy she was able to last even longer this season than she was in her first. Following Spicy V's spicy eviction, the final four are left reeling after their last evictee's dying words exposed a bunch of alliances that a lot of people apparently were not aware of. Bailey, for example, is very intrigued to hear about the hot chocolate and big bucks but that Anthony and Victoria were in, even though Anthony lies to Bailey about Lexus's involvement, and then later backtracks on it after he gets caught. In their next head of household competition, we get a classic before or after competition, where each player will have to figure out if one event took before or after another. Bailey and Lexus get the first question right, off to a 1-1 lead right off the bat. Everyone gets question 2 and 3 right, but Lexus is the only one to get number 4 right, meaning she leads this 4-3-2. Everyone gets 5 right, meaning Todd is out of the running as it all comes down to this last question. That Lexus gets wrong while Bailey gets correct, allowing Bailey to match Lexus' score as the two face off in a tiebreaker. Bailey comes through with the closer guess, winning her first head of household competition of the season and securing her spot in the finale. Bailey takes Todd to Wendy's, where she cements in that they need to win the power of veto to make the ultimate decision. While they're eating, Anthony does the same with Lexus, as Anthony correctly assumes that Bailey doesn't want to nominate him, as he did not nominate her last week. But before we can get to nominations, we have the 12th annual Big Brother Canada Awards. Jensen from Big Brother Canada 9 does the red carpet, while Big Brother 11's Kuzi starts things off with a roast, which is amazing. The creeper jump scare wins freakiest moment. Winner's winning moment went to Todd's down the drain. Live POV win for the double. Don't panic wins best gross out moment. And best Toddism is when he doesn't move after Elijah nominates him, which is amazing. We also get a random jury house segment this week when Victoria enters, as the jury promises to grill our finalists with questions never before seen. Okay, Lady Gagatoria, questions never seen before, never been done, unseen, totally unbelievable. Love it. Next, we get to their nominations, and Bailey falls through on leaving Anthony off the block, choosing Lexus and Victoria to put on the block. But obviously, all that matters this week is the power of veto, so this really was just all for show, especially when Bailey makes it clear to us in confessional she wants to save Todd and evict Anthony before the finale. In their final and most important power veto competition of the season, house guests must search a derailed train in order to find a set of keys and use a coding system to fix a damaged fuse box. After restoring the power, they must use the clues to place the house guests in their correct seats. Using the empty seat numbers, they must collect a briefcase, climb on top of the train, and slide to the ground. The house guest who gets off the train in the fastest time will win the power of veto. Bailey goes first and struggles on the fuse box system when she doesn't realize the code on the outside of the train is out of order, which costs her a lot of time. Anthony goes next and does the exact same thing, and it also costs him a lot of time. Lexus goes next and actually completes the fuses rather quickly, but she struggles a bit on the seating order, eventually completing it. Todd is last to go, and much like almost everyone before him, he screws up the fuses, but seems to go quickly in the seating puzzle, meaning it comes down to time since, let's be real, this edit for this challenge doesn't give you any idea how anyone is actually doing it all whatsoever. So when the results are revealed, we learn the winning time was just under 37 minutes. Everyone opens their briefcases, and it is Miss Lexus who wins the final power of veto, basically guaranteeing her the second place in our finale because, who's obviously not going to use the power of veto on themselves? What will Lexus do with all this power with less than an hour to go in this special eviction? Tell me why there is some actual random tension here, as when Anthony sits down with Lexus to discuss strategy, he tells Lexus that she could keep the nominations the same and he will evict Todd, which is like, tell me why it seems like Lexus is possibly considering this maybe? I don't know. Her face just is totally expressionless a lot of the time to the point where I can't tell if she's like deep in thought or just trying to put up a porku face that like no one else can figure out here. And it's like I can't also figure out here if it's maybe like a blankness that she's just trying to do. Like I don't know. Like I can't figure it out. But it seems like she trusts Anthony enough to the point where she would let him make this decision. When in reality, Lexus should probably be trying to get Anthony out since he would be the hardest opponent in the finale. Now, Lexus does his best to push Lexus to evict Anthony, while Bailey questions her final two with Anthony when he divulges to the information that Anthony suggested for Lexus to leave the nominations the same. Because for Bailey, this means they've likely had a deal for a long time, since everyone would be crazy to not use the power veto on themselves and let someone else make the decision for you unless you've had to deal with them for a long time. Bailey is really smart in her reads on these things. Like insane. We get to the final power veto ceremony, and thankfully, Lexus does not make us question her at least too much in this situation at this point, as she decides to use power veto on herself, with Anthony having no choice but to take her place and touch the lock for the first time in 2 seasons. Incredible, rather, Anthony. I will give you props on that. Amazing. However, Lexus does make me question her overall strategy, as she then decides to give Anthony the final place in the finale, choosing to cast the soul of vote to evict Todd from the house. I will say this is a really bad look on Lexus's part, and while it would have been an uphill road for her to try to beat Bailey and Todd in the final head of household, she at least would have had a better shot against either of them in the end if she were sitting against them versus being taken by Anthony and losing, or at least so I thought going into this. But let's talk about our evictee Todd, because I had a huge spot for Todd. He proved some of the most funny moments here, and mostly, just stemming from his fun-loving personality and his decision to play dumb for basically the whole season. Him not getting up when nominated is completely iconic. It's probably one of the top 5 moments of the season for me. Also, like say he may have gotten a little more attractive the longer he stayed in the house for me. I don't know, but I'm definitely bummed there wasn't more banana hammock this season. Also, the moment when Anthony called his package too small was hilarious. That just provided so many unintentional funny moments for me, and I think my favorite lines of the season could be the short-lived period where him, Bailey, and Spicy were a trio. Sad that final three didn't come to fruition though, but I definitely wouldn't mind having Todd back on a future season if he's so lucky, just 'cause he's just so much fun. We close our penultimate episode with season 10 winner Kevin Jacobs facilitating our jury segment, where I have to cackle when Spacey just busts out that trash bag in hopes that Anthony walks through the door so she could give it to him. What if this is a taste of jury question? Oh my god, I'm so excited because this is already so shady. They already agree that Anthony played the best game, but he didn't stay loyal to anyone. Well, everyone kind of wonders what game Lexus played whatsoever. Bailey seems the most overall favorite from everyone here, including myself, but she also has the toughest road in the finale here, so it seems, since it's set up as, like a possible Anthony Lexus versus Bailey situation, but who knows how close Bailey is against Anthony, you know? So we're set up for a very interesting and fun finale, depending on who manages to make it there. Now, my brain, heart, gut prediction before going into the finale was this final three was extremely unexpected to me overall. But at this point, everything in my brain fully expected an Anthony win just because, it's Big Brother can, which serves lately only to disappoint me. And I expected my least desired outcome to happen here. Not to say that Anthony didn't play a phenomenal game. I just wasn't pulling for him as much as I was pulling for other people. Like my heart was pulling for Bailey. And something in my gut feels like she just had a much better opportunity to win than I ever expected her to have the longer she stayed in the house. So I think Bailey did the best at mitigating her threat level out of everybody in the cast and getting people removed from the game that thought otherwise. But in the first part of the three-part final head household edition, which is based on Disney's Inside Out 2, house guests must slide down a waterfall into the pool. They must grab a colored orb, climb to their station, and roll the orbs into corresponding tubes. If they land the ball in the wrong tube, they must restart that tube. The first house guest to correctly fill all their tubes win part 1 of the final head of household competition and automatically advances into part 3. Now, the main strategy in this competition seems to try to fill up one color of orbs at a time before moving on to the next. Bailey and Lexus are a lot faster at retrieving the orbs, but they seem to struggle the most on sinking the orbs into the correct tubes. Anthony is taking things a lot slower, taking his time to dry off the orbs before he rolls them, and the slow and steady focus on precision turns out to be the right strategy as Anthony during part 1 and automatically advancing to the final part of the head of household competition. This leaves Bailey and Lexus to go head to head in part 2 of the final head of household, Cave of Secrets. In this competition, house guests will be asked 4 questions. For each question, they must use a magnet to collect a chest of answer blocks, then stack the correct answer blocks on a spinning spike. House guest who completes all 4 questions faster will win part 2 of the final head of household competition and face Anthony in part 3. Lexus initially struggles on the first question, and it seems to really shake her confidence a bit as she starts going slower and second guessing her answers moving forward, getting overwhelmed to the point of tears. Meanwhile, Bailey seems unshakable here, moving quickly through the challenge, only really struggling on the last question, and her decision to focus on stacking her pieces so they stay up pays off, as Bailey completes the challenge with 10 minutes, securing her opportunity to play in the final part of the head of household competition. We go back to Orissa, where we get our last look of the final three as our final showdown for power begins. And can I just say, I love the production of the part three of these final head of households. The screens always be hitting just right. Our final showdown begins as Anthony and Bailey will play jury questions. In this competition, house guests were asked a series of questions based on the members of the jury and their games. A correct answer earns them 1 point. The house guest with the most points after 7 questions will be the final head of household of the season, with the sole vote to evict the last member of the jury. In the first question, which is how many jurors were evicted on even numbered days, Bailey locks in her answer and then immediately gasps. Like she just seemingly realizes immediately that she locked in the wrong answer. Anthony gets the question correct, giving him the point advantage going into question 2. Both players get that question correct, but Anthony gets the third question wrong, allowing Bailey to quickly tie it up 2-2. They both get the next question correct, and the next question correct, and the next question correct. So it comes down to just one question that they also both get correct. So in true Big Brother fashion, it will all come down to the tiebreaker question. Combined, how many days did the members of the jury spend nominated for eviction? Anthony answers 33 to Bailey's 108, with the correct answer without going over being 75, meaning Anthony has won the final head of household competition with the sole vote to decide whether it is Bailey or Lexus who sits next to him against the jury. And in his final speech, Anthony shares how much he wants to take the player to the end that he thinks he has the best chance of beating, ultimately deciding to evict Lexus as the final juror, taking Bailey to the final two. And I've got to say, this decision completely baffles my mind. And I gotta say, it's gotta be one of the biggest misreads I've seen in a long time. Now, my assumption at this point was based on the structure of the game and the fact they were both members of Hot Chocolate, that maybe perhaps in Anthony's mind, he thought the women in that alliance were likely supporting Lexus, and I could see where he could think if they wanted to stick to their ultimate goal, that I don't think they did, that they would ultimately likely give Lexus the win over him to ensure Big Brother Canada's first black female winner. But, as we all know, they were anything but Lexus fans here. I mean, they both turned on him. So, like, they didn't like Lexus. Like, he knew that. So I was just fully expecting to see Bailey go here, unfortunately, because I never viewed her as an easy final two opponent. So I'm so confused. But as for Lexus herself, I think to some degree with Victoria's opinion that, Lexus didn't really do that much in the game. I kind of agree with it. She kind of tucked herself under Matthew to the beginning of the game and then under Anthony when Matthew left. And other than her final POV here, which again was another weird move to stick with Anthony in the first place, it was just kind of also ironic the fact that he cuts her right after he saved her. So that's kind of insane to me. But I do like Lexus. I thought she was pretty cool. Otherwise, I do think it was hilarious with her final words when she tells Anthony, money over loyalty, which is like, oop, you tell him Lexus. But as she walks out the doors, that leaves us with the final two. I never, ever, ever expected to see Anthony versus Bailey. Now we bring in the pre-jurors as well as the previous jurors as they react to Lexus becoming the final member of the jury as we get a quick Q&A session with the final two. I think my favorite line from the question comes from Bailey, who compares the final two to the king queen in chess, with the king who doesn't have to move very much because he's protected by the queen, who is the real powerful player on the board. Anthony gives my least favorite answer to Victoria when he still blames her for destroying the alliance, even if he literally in the next question says he got rid of her because she was his biggest threat, which I think is a huge flaw in his questioning, because he should have just owned it up to begin with instead of trying to blame someone else for their downfall in the game. even if it is justified, no one, especially not Spicy B, is going to sit there and take it. So I'm not sure why Anthony expected any other result for her to be spicy. I also have to laugh at Lexus's question to Anthony because it just goes to show how hypocritical Anthony's game was to some degree here, coming in preaching loyalty, but ultimately betraying everybody to get to the end, which is actually, person he takes to is the one person who was loyal to their alliance while also kind of making strategic decisions as well too. So it's kind of cringe a little bit. It's kind of like watching Big Brother Canada 7 again. Like Anthony's just his flaw is definitely that jury management here. And I could definitely also say that perhaps a lot of these players could be bitter as well too. But at the same time, is there a rightfully bitter jury? I think that sometimes there is, and I also think there's sometimes that a jury can be bitter, but also have other opportunities that are able to be voted for, other options here that could possibly be better options anyways. So, you could be better at a player, but you could also still make the right decision. Anyways, one by one, the jury votes. And for that, we get the Canada's vote reveal for their favorite player of the season. And it turns out that Todd is the winner, getting $10,000. But the moment we've been waiting for, Rissa reads the final votes, and the winner of Big Brother Canada 12 in a vote of 6-1 is Bailey. Like, what an unexpectedly amazing player Bailey turned out to be here. I was so infected with her over the top energy in the first few weeks of the game that I couldn't believe how, like, below that stood an extremely strategic and cunning social player as well. Like, the men were coming after Bailey so many times, but each time she managed to persevere, and not only that, but turned the people who were gunning for her on her side, or if they couldn't get her on her side, she voted them out. I think she correctly pegged at one point here that Anthony's game was probably more Big Brother 19 Paul and decided to hitch her wagon to him instead of Spicy. And that turned out to be the game winning move for her because he literally cut everyone to ensure he got to the end with Bailey, even though he had so many deals with so many players that he cut as well too. I do think because she had an early target on her back, that likely that may have read to some individuals this may not have been respected by the house, but all those players that wanted Bailey out here, they wanted her out because she was a threat. So I definitely think that this finale ends with a massive misread from Anthony, who otherwise plays an amazing game here. But honestly, I think he kind of still regardlessly loses at the end, just because his betrayal of Spicy was never going to win him a jury vote with her still on the jury. So ultimately here, he probably should have either cut her before the jury or maybe cut her the final three when she has no time to really talk to the jury here. But regardless, if you want to say the jury is bitter or not, I don't think that takes away at all from Bailey being crowned the winner here because I do think they ultimately made the right decision. And it is so amazing to see our first queen crowned in 6 seasons. We could not have picked a better one here. Bailey is a fantastic player to take the title, given she encompasses both the personality and the brains to become, I think, one of my favorite winners of this franchise in a very long time, and just one of the most entertaining and infectious winners we've had in a very long time as well, too. Overall, I've got to say, I was high on Big Brother Canada 12 as the pre-jury portion of the game was probably one of the wildest rides I've ever witnessed. The jury portion of the game that is completely unexpected on so many levels. I do think there is a ton of bad gameplay at hand here, don't get me wrong, and some things I wish we had the feeds to dig a little deeper into, which brings the season down a bit, but ultimately the finished product here was a very fun watch from start to finish. I was always looking forward to the next episode. The pacing was well done, and I think the twists and competitions felt pretty fair to me as well too. Overall, this could place in the top half of all my Big Brother Canada seasons, but I would need to go back to really decide where these things go here for a future season ranking. Ooh, spoiler alert for a possible later episode video here. Looking to some of that content in the future here. Thank you for listening, and if you made it all the way through, tell me about your opinions on the season in the comments below so we can keep spilling that tea off. Until next time, this is Renegade signing out. Bye!
My first nominee is Todd. Todd.
You gotta go to the chair.